Handa na ba kayong matuto? So, for today, we are going to tackle about the ocean energy or the tidal power stations. So, what is tidal energy? Ang tidal energy ay enerhiya na nanggagaling sa galaw ng mga tides o alon sa dagat, kung saan ginagamit ang pagtaas at pagbaba ng tubig ng karagatan para makalikha ng enerhiya. So, ano nga ba yung kinetic energy? So, yun yung nade-generate mula sa lakas ng tubig na nanggagaling sa pag-akyat at pagbaba ng tubig ng dagat. So, yun yung sa alon. So, habang gumagalaw ang tubig, nagkakaroon ito ng enerhiya. So, next, we are going to tackle about the tidal power. So, ano nga ba ang tidal power? Ito ay isang sistema ng enerhiya na gumagamit ng gravitational hydropower. So, kung saan ginagamit ang galaw ng tubig para itulak ang turbine at mag-generate ng kuryente. Tayo sa causes and frequency of tides. So, moon, ay yun yung dahilan o sanhi ng mga high tides at low tides. So, pag sinabi naman din nating tidal force, ito yung nabubuo mula sa gravitational pull ng buwan. So, ito ang nagiging dahilan ng pag-bulge o yung pag-umbok ng tubig sa Earth sa magkabilang gilid. So, ang gilid na pinakamalapit sa buwan at ang gilid na pinakamalayo sa buwan. So, meron tayong tinatawag na high tides or sa other term niya is bulge nga, yung katulad sa nabanggit ko kanina. Ang high tides ay resulta ng mga bulge ng tubig sa Earth dulot ng tidal force. So, ano nga ba yung frequency of tides? So, karamihan sa mga coastal areas ay nakakaranas ng dalawang high tides at dalawang low tides kada araw. So, every lunar day, meron tayong 24 hours and 50 minutes. And yung sa solar day, meron naman tayong 24 hours. So, kaya meron 50 minutes doon sa lunar day kasi umiikot yung buwan. Ano nga ba ang solar day sa lunar day? Pinagkaiba. So, yung solar day o yung 24 oras na kailangan ng Earth upang makaikot ng isang buong ikot kay ugnay ng araw. While yung lunar day naman, yung 24 hours at 50 minutes na oras na kailangan ng Earth upang makapagpiikot ng isang buong ikot kaugnay ang moon or with respect to moon kung tawagin. Isunod natin yung sa tides. So, coastal areas, ito yung nakakaranas ng dalawang high tides at dalawang low tides bawat 24 hours and 50 minutes. So, yung high tides, nangyayari siya tuwing 12 hours and 25 minutes sa yung pagitan. Then, 6 hours and 12.5 minutes, yung oras na kailangan para magbago ang tubig mula sa high tide papuntang low tide and low tide papuntang high tide. Isunod natin yung sa high tides and low tides. So, kapag sinabi nating high tides, nangyayari kapag ang bahagi ng Earth ay nakaharap sa buwan at pati na rin sa kabilang gilid na kabilang bahagi ng Earth na malayo sa buwan. So, halimbawa, ito yung buwan, ito yung side ng Earth na nakaharap, then ito yung pinakamalayong side. So, ang nangyayari naman sa low tides, nangyayari sa bahagi ng Earth na pagitan ng mga high tides. So, ito yung side na yun. So, what is bulges? So, ang bulges ay ang mga pag-umbok o pagtaas ng tubig sa dagat dulot ng gravitational pull ng buwan. So, may dalawang bulge, isa sa bahagi na nakaharap sa Earth and nakaharap sa buwan at sa kabila na sanhi ng puwersa ng gravity ng buwan. So, bakit nga ba may high tide doon sa farthest side ng moon sa Earth or yung sa kabilang side? So, meron tayong tinatawag na dalawang high tide, which is yung high tide and yung low high tide. So, kapag sinabi natin na high tide, ay yung bahagi ng Earth na kung saan nakaharap sa moon. So, doon, ang nangyayari, hinahatak ng gravitational pull ng moon yung ocean. Samantala, doon naman sa kabilang side, ang hinahatak kasi is yung planet na. And, kaya nag-iintak yung water doon due to inertia. So, ang nangyayari kaya nagkakaroon ng bulges, hinahatak nga ng gravitational pull ng moon yung planet, hindi yung ocean.
Ngayon naman, pag-uusapan natin ang dahilan kung bakit may high tide at low tide. Particular na kung bakit may dalawang tidal bulges sa mundo. Isa sa side na nakaharap sa buwan at isa naman sa kabila. Unahin na natin yung side na nakaharap sa buwan. Dahil mas malapit ito sa buwan, mas malakas ang hatak ng gravity ng buwan dito. Dahil doon, hinihila nito ang tubig papunta sa direksyon ng buwan. Kaya nabubuo ang unang tidal bulge. Habang hinihila ng tubig, may inertia o puwersang pumipigil dito. Pero dahil mas malakas ang gravity ng buwan, hindi na ito napapanatili ang tubig sa lugar. Kaya may pag-umbok o bulge na nangyayari sa side na ito. Ngayon, paano naman yung kabilang side ng mundo? Malayo sa buwan. Dito naman, mas mahina na ang hatak ng gravity ng buwan. Pero dahil sa inertia o natural na paggalaw ng tubig, gusto nitong manatili sa direksyon kung saan ito papunta. Kaya naman habang hinihila ng buwan ang mismong Earth palapit sa kanya, parang nahuhulog o naiiwan ang tubig sa malayong side. Kaya nabubuo rin ang pangalawang bulge. Kaya naman sa madaling sabi, may dalawang bulges na nagaganap. Isa dahil sa direktang paghila ng gravity ng buwan at isa naman dahil sa inertia ng tubig sa kabilang panig ng mundo. Ito ang dahilan kung bakit may dalawang high tides sa isang araw. Isang high tide sa side na nakaharap sa buwan at isa naman sa kabilang side. So, nakita na natin kung paano nabubuo ang tides dahil sa gravity ng buwan at inertia. Ngayon, tingnan natin ang epekto nito sa tidal energy. Sa slide na ito, makikita natin kung paano nagkakaroon ng dalawang bulges. Isa dahil sa hatak ng gravity ng buwan at isa naman dahil sa inertia ng tubig. Sa madaling salita, ang tubig ay hinahatak ng buwan sa isang side, habang ang tubig sa kabilang side ay parang naiiwan dahil sa inertia. Kaya nagkakaroon ng dalawang high tides sa isang araw. Ngayon, dahil sa paulit-ulit na paggalaw ng tubig, pataas at pababa, nagkakaroon tayo ng pagkakataon na gamitin ito para sa tidal power. Dito naman sa slide na ito ay nagpapakita ng ilan sa pinakamalalaking tidal power station sa mundo. Kung mapapansin natin, ang pinakamalaking tidal power station sa mundo ay ang Siwa Lake Tidal Power Station sa South Korea na may kapasidad na 254 megawatts. At susunod naman dito ang Reims Tidal Power Station sa France naman to, na meron siyang 240 megawatts. Tapos yung Annapolis Royal Generating Station sa Canada naman. Ito naman ay may 20 megawatts. At pang-apat yung Meighen sa United Kingdom na may 6 megawatts. Ang huli ay Jiangsha Tidal Power Station sa China na may 3.2 megawatts. So, ano ang ibig sabihin nito? Ibig sabihin, ang tidal energy ay isang tunay na ginagamit na teknolohiya sa iba't ibang bansa at may malaking potential ito bilang isang renewable energy source. Dahil ang tides ay predictable, hindi katulad ng hangin o araw na pabago-bago. Mas madali natin mapapakinabangan ang enerhiya nito sa hinaharap. Kaya sa pangkalahatan, ang tides ay hindi lang basta natural na phenomenon, kundi mahalagang bahagi na rin ng ating energy solutions sa hinaharap. Ito ang Siwa Lake Tidal Power Station sa South Korea, na siyang pinakamalaking tidal power station sa mundo. Kung titignan natin, para lang siyang isang malaking dam na may mga turbines sa ilalim. Pero imbis na tubig tabang mula sa ilog ang ginagamit, tubig alat mula sa dagat ang nagpapagana dito. Ang problema sa ganitong klase ng power station ay hindi ito pwedeng itayo kung saan-saan. Kailangan may malakas at predictable na tides para sulit ang investment. Kailangan din ng tamang topografiya para bay o isang lugar na madaling maharangan ng dam para makontrol ang agos ng tubig. Kaya kahit napakaganda ng tidal energy, hindi ito kasing flexible ng ibang renewable resources tulad ng solar at wind. May limitasyon kung saan lang ito pwedeng gawin. Pero kung magagamit ito sa tamang lugar, napaka-efficient nito dahil ang tides ay predictable. Siguradong may power ka araw-araw, hindi tulad ng solar na umaasa sa araw o wind energy na nakadepende naman sa lakas ng hangin. Kaya ang Siwa Lake Tidal Power Station ay isang magandang halimbawa ng kung Paano natin pwedeng gamitin ang tides para sa renewable energy? Kung makakahanap pa tayo ng iba pang lugar na pwedeng pagtayuan nito, malaking tulong ito sa pagkakaroon ng stable at sustainable energy sa hinaharap.
The Siwol Lake Tidal Power Station in South Korea is the world's largest tidal power plant with a capacity of 254 megawatts. It is located on Siwol Lake near Ansan in Gyeonggi Province. The station was built to generate renewable energy while also improving water quality in the artificial lake, which had suffered from pollution due to restricted water flow. Ang Siwol Lake Tidal Power Station sa South Korea ay ang pinakamalaking tidal power plant sa buong mundo na may kapasidad na 254 megawatts. Matatagpuan ito sa Siwol Lake malapit sa Ansan sa Gyeonggi Province. Itinatag ang planta upang makalikha ng renewable energy na gamit ang lakas ng tide o alon ng dagat, habang tinutulungan din ito ang pagpapabuti ng kalidad ng tubig sa lawa. Ang lawa kasi ay naging marumi dahil sa kakulangan ng daloy ng tubig. Sa pamamagitan ng planta, nakalikha sila ng enerhiya at sabay na natulungan ang kalikasan. A tidal power station is a facility that generates electricity by harnessing the energy from ocean tides. Since tides are predictable and consistent, tidal power is a reliable source of renewable energy. Tidal power stations are built in coastal areas with strong tidal movements. Ang tidal power station ay isang pasilidad na kumukolekta ng enerhiya mula sa mga alon ng dagat upang makagawa ng kuryente. Dahil ang mga alon ay predictable at pare-pareho, ang tidal power ay isang maaasahang mapagkukunan ng renewable energy. Karaniwang itinatayo ang mga tidal power stations sa mga baybaying dagat kung saan malakas ang mga tidal movements o paggalaw ng tubig upang magamit ang lakas ng alon sa paggawa ng enerhiya. Tidal power harnesses the energy of ocean tides to generate electricity, offering a sustainable and renewable energy source. There are three main types of tidal power system. First, we have the tidal stream generators, tidal barrage, and the tidal lagoons. First, we have the tidal stream generator. So, tidal stream generator are very similar to wind turbines except they are below the water surface instead of above or on land. The water's current pushes the blade of the turbine, which is connected to a generator that creates electricity. Tidal stream generator are able to produce much more electricity than wind power plants, mainly because water is much denser than air. However, water's high density also means that the tidal turbines need to be much stronger than wind turbines, making them more expensive to manufacture. Next, tidal stream generator turbines are large, but they create relatively little disruption to ecosystem around them as compared to tidal barrage. The world's first tidal stream generator was constructed in year 2007 at Strangford Lough in Northern Ireland. Ang tidal stream generator ay katulad ng wind turbine ngunit nasa ilalim ng tubig at gumagamit ng alon para paikutin ang mga blades ng turbine na nakakonekta sa isang generator upang makagawa ng kuryente. Mas malaki ang kayang i-produce na enerhiya ng tidal stream generator kaysa sa mga wind power dahil mas matindi ang densidad ng tubig kaysa hangin. Gayunpaman, nangangailangan ito ng mas matibay na turbine kaya mas mahal ito. Mas maliit din ang epekto nito sa ecosystem kumpara sa tidal barrage. Ang unang tidal stream generator sa mundo ay itinayo noong 2007 sa Strangford Lough, Northern Ireland. So, how tidal stream generator works? A tidal stream generator is an underwater turbine that harnesses the kinetic energy of moving tidal currents to generate electricity. As tides flow, the water pushes the turbine blades, causing them to rotate and drive a generator that converts mechanical energy to electrical power. This electricity is then transmitted to the grid via underwater cables. Unlike wind or solar energy, tidal power is highly predictable, making it a reliable, renewable energy source. However, Installation and maintenance are costly, and there are concerns about its impact on marine life. Despite these challenges, tidal stream generators like the Megan Tidal project in Scotland demonstrate their potential in the transition to clean energy. Ang tidal stream generator ay isang underwater turbine na kumukolekta ng enerhiya mula sa alon ng dagat upang makagawa ng kuryente. Habang dumadaloy ang tide, itinutulok ng tubig ang turbine blades na nagpapaikot sa generator upang makagawa ng electric power. Ang kuryente ay pinapadala sa grid gamit ang underwater cables. Mas predictable ang tidal power kaysa sa wind or solar, kaya't isang maasahang renewable energy source. Gayunpaman, mahal ang pag-install at maintenance nito at may mga epekto sa marine life, ngunit may malaking potensyal sa malinis na enerhiya tulad ng Megan Tidal Project sa Scotland. Next, we have the types of turbines used in tidal stream generator. First, we have the HOUT or the horizontal axis wind turbine, and then the VOUT, the vertical axis wind turbine. So first type, we have the HOUT tower turbine, a horizontal axis wind turbine with a tower structure that faces tidal currents, efficiently capturing energy from strong flows. Isang horizontal axis wind turbine na may tower structure na nakaharap sa tidal currents, na mahusay sa pagkuha ng enerhiya mula sa malalakas na agos ng tubig. Second, we have the VOUT Savinius turbine, a vertical axis wind turbine with a simple drag-based design, ideal for low tide speeds but less efficient in strong currents. So, isang vertical axis wind turbine na may simpleng drag-based design na angkop sa mababang tidal speeds ngunit hindi kasing epektibo sa malalakas na agos. And then third, we have the VOUT Darius turbine, a vertical axis wind turbine with curved blades that capture energy efficiently at higher tidal speeds, requiring more complex engineering for stability. Isang vertical axis wind turbine na may curved blades na mahusay sa pagkuha ng enerhiya sa mas mataas na tidal speeds, ngunit nangangailangan ng mas komplikadong disenyo upang matiyak ang katatagan. The second tidal energy generator was a pioneering tidal stream turbine installed in Strangford Lough, Northern Ireland in year 2008. It was the world's first commercial-scale tidal energy generator and had a capacity of 1.2 megawatts, enough to power around 1,500 homes. Ang second tidal energy generator ay isang makabagong tidal stream turbine na itinayo sa Strangford Lough, Northern Ireland noong taong 2008. Ito ang unang commercial-scale tidal energy generator sa mundo na may kapasidad na 1.2 megawatts, sapat upang magbigay ng kuryente sa humigit kumulang na 1,500 na tahanan.
Tidal barrage. Tidal barrages are low-wall dams usually installed at tidal inlets or estuaries. Estuaries, ito yung kung saan nagkakaroon ng tidal inlets. Dito lang siya pwede itayo. Similar to traditional hydroelectric dams, sluice gates are used to create a reservoir on one side of the barrage. Sluice gate, ito yung maghahati sa Bay Area and Sea Area. Ito din yung pipigil sa tubig kung sakaling kailangan na itong isara because of some conditions na ipapaliwanag sa mga susunod na slides. The barrage is secured to the seafloor, while the top of the barrage is mas mataas lang ng konti kung saan yung water level nag-hit during the highest tide. Tidal turbines are located towards the bottom of the barrage inside a tunnel which allow to flow through. Mayroong tunnel sa ilalim kung saan doon nakalagay ang ating turbine. Sa pagitan ito ng sluice gate, doon dumadaan yung tubig na nagpapagenerate ng kuryente. So, tidal barrages look like a traditional hydropower dams. Turbines located along the bottom of the barrage are turned with the incoming and outgoing tides. During an incoming high tide, the water flows over the turbines as the water rises. Then, the water flows back through the turbines at as it becomes low tide. The turbines are connected to a generator which produce the electricity. Ayun nga, kapag high tide, ino-open ang sluice gate para makadaan yung tubig sa turbine. Ino-open din ito pag low tide para ibalik yung tubig from bay area to sea area. After a construction phase lasting 5 years, the Rance Tidal Power Station was opened on the 26 November 1966. This was the first tidal power station to take advantage of tidal water flow to produce electricity. Ang kauna-unahang tidal barrage is sa France. Naka-highlight sa pagkakakonstruct yung paghaharang ng tubig. Sa dalawang gilid nito, meron yung dalawang mini island kung saan naharangan nito yung dalawang gilid. Hindi maaaring may lusutan na iba yung tubig. Doon lang mismo sa tunnel kung saan andun yung tidal turbine. If may ibang dadaanan yung tubig, bababa yung efficiency ng power plant, kaya sa mga estuaries usually nagtatayo ng tidal barrage. Okay, next is Siwa Lake Tidal Power Station. Siwa Lake Tidal Power Station is the world's largest tidal power installation with a total power output capacity of 254 megawatts. Nung na-complete ito noong 2011, it surpassed France's 240 megawatts France Tidal Power Station, which was the world's largest for 45 years. It is operated by the Korea Water Resources Corporation. Next natin is Tidal Barrage Flood Generation. This is the illustration of the tidal barrage. Makikita natin kung saan sa left side ay high tide, open ang sluice gate, then nagpo-flow ang water towards the tunnel into the tidal turbine that will generate electricity. Tapos mapupunta ito sa tidal basin, yung tubig. Makikita din dito na mas mataas lang ng kaunti yung tidal barrage sa high tide level since yung taas nito ay ginagawang road where people can walk by. Aside from this information, meron din tayong condition about when will they open the sluice gate. If the high tide is at least 2 meters from the low tide, pwede na itong buksan. Kapag pantay naman, isasara. Okay, next is tidal barrage EBB generation. It is the process of capturing energy from the outflow of water during low tide. Outflow happens when the tidal basin is in high tide level and the sea area is in low tide level. This is how they capture energy when the sea is low tide. Ginagamit yung tidal basin para makakuha ng energy. Ibinabalik nito ang tubig sa dagat. Binubuksan lang nila yung sluice gate para mag-flow yung water to the turbine tunnel.
Tidal barrage. A tidal barrage is a dam-like structure that uses the energy of tides to generate electricity. Tidal barrage. Ang tidal barrage, unlike sa mga wind turbine na ang ginagamit na nagpapaikot sa turbine o sa propeller nito ay hangin. Sa tidal barrage, ang nagpapaikot sa propeller nito o sa turbine nito ay ang tubig or agos ng tubig o daloy ng tubig. Kaunting trivia lang. Ang renewable energy na ginagamitan ng tubig, ito ang pinakamalakas mag-produce ng electricity. Bakit? Dahil hamak lakas ng force ng tubig kumpara sa ibang source ng renewable energy like nung sa may wind. Hamak lakas kasi ng force ng tubig. Kaya nga sinasabing pag nasa tubig ka, delikado. Dahil yung mga force ng tubig na yan, ng apakalakas niyan, especially tumalon sa tao, hindi sa marunong lumangoy. Posibleng higupin lang yan ng tubig. Ganun kalakas ang force ng tubig. Kaya malakas siya mag-generate ng electricity. Tidal barrage. Ito naman ang parts ng tidal barrage. Ang tidal barrage ay yun mismo ang pinaka-structure niya. Sa loob ng barrage, mayroong dalawang sluice gate na naghahati sa ocean at sa tidal basin. At sa baba naman ng barrage, doon natin malolocate ang turbine o yung mga propeller. Ang tidal barrage ay may tinatawag na dalawang side. The ocean side and the tidal basin or bay side. Pagka high tide naman sa ocean side, pag inopen ang gate, papunta sa may tidal basin. Ang flow niya from left to right. Example, from left to right. Left sa ocean, right sa tidal basin. Pag high tide sa ocean, low tide sa basin, pag binuksan natin ang gate, ang flow niya papunta doon sa bayside. Papunta sa low tide. Ngayon naman, pag naman low tide na sa ocean at naka high tide sa may tidal basin or bayside, i-open ulit ang gate. At ngayon, ang magiging flow naman from tidal basin or bayside to ocean. Ngayon, tuwing kailan nagsasara ang gate na to or sluice gate? Nagsasara yan na pagka nagpantay na ang tubig sa ocean side at sa tidal basin. For example, ocean side ito. Ito sa tidal basin. Iluksan natin yung dalawang gate. Unti-unti, bababa yan. Magpapantay. Pag nagpantay na yan, ibig sabihin yan, wala nang flow na nangyayari sa ilalim. Kasi nakapantay na yan. Ngayon, isasara ngayon yung sluice gate. Pag nakapantay na ngayon yan, mag-low tide naman yun sa ocean side. Bubuksan ulit yung gate. Tsaka ngayon magpo-flow simula sa tidal basin hanggang ocean side. Hanggang sa magpantay ulit, magsasara ulit ang sluice gate. At yung cycle ay paulit-ulit lang nangyayari. Ito pa isang illustration ng tidal barrage. Sa picture makita natin ang tidal barrage or yung turbine nito. Meron tayo tinatawag na draft tube, generator, propeller, and wicket gate. Sa draft tube, doon nakapaloob ang propeller, kasama ng generator, tsaka yung wicket gate. Ngayon, yung generator na to, ito yung nag-generate ng electricity. Sa propeller naman, ito yung pinapaikot ng force ng tubig. Sir, ano yung wicket gate na yun? Para saan yun? Magandang tanong yan. Ang wicket gate, ito ay yung gate dun sa may gilid nung, or sa may makita natin kung saan nakaturo yung wicket gate. Dun siya nakalagay. Kasi once na inopen natin ang sluice gate or yung main gate, inopen natin ganun, magpo-flow ngayon yung tubig sa loob ng draft tube. Ngayon, para ma-lessen yung pagiging mabilis na pagsira, dahil pag binuksan natin ang sluice gate, apakalakas ng force niyan. Mataas ang possibilities na masira ang ating turbine. Kaya merong wicket gate diyan. Once na meron ng tubig sa loob ng draft tube, once na mapuno siya, bubuksan ngayon yung wicket gate para hindi na pwersa ang propeller or ang ating turbine. Dahil pagka walang wicket gate, binuksan natin ang sluice gate, pagpasok ng tubig, rumaragas agad yan, papunta sa propeller. Pagka ganun nangyari, mabilis lang masisira ang ating turbine at mas mapapagastos pa tayo. Ang pagbuo ng mga ganitong tidal barrage or pagbuo ng mga renewable energy na gumagamit ng tubig ay mapakalaking gastos kumpara sa mga wind turbine.
Now let's talk about the third type of tidal power generation. So, tidal lagoon is the third type of tidal power generation along with the tidal stream and tidal barrage. Tidal lagoon is considered as a new tidal energy option in which it is to construct circular retaining walls embedded with turbines that can capture the potential energy of tides. The created reservoirs are similar to those of tidal barrage except that the location is considered to be artificial and does not contain pre-existing ecosystem. So, tidal lagoons are a type of tidal power generation that uses a man-made enclosed body of water, which is the lagoon, unlike tidal barrage, which blocks an existing estuary. Lagoons are built in areas that don't already have a natural tidal enclosure. So how does tidal lagoon works? A tidal lagoon works by obtaining a circular or oval wall, which is the retaining wall, creating the lagoon. So turbines are embedded in this wall. As the tide rises and falls, water flows into and out of the lagoon, passing through the turbines and generating electricity. So the key difference from a barrage is that the lagoon is artificial, not a natural feature. So lagoon is also called as reservoirs, and reservoirs is an enlarged lake behind the dam, usually built to store fresh water, often doubling for hydroelectric power generation. So it is a large natural or artificial lake used as a source of water supply. The Cancel Tidal Lagoon, Swansea Bay in Wales, United Kingdom would have been the first tidal power station of this type once built. So, however, there is also a thing where double tidal lagoon may exist. So, here is an example of double tidal lagoon. So now let's take a grasp of the picture presented here, which is the double tidal lagoon baseload seen by Scottish scientists. So how does it work? At high tide, the sea gates of the high lagoon are open and the high lagoon is filled up to high tide level. When the EBB tide begins, the sea gates of the high lagoon are closed and remain closed until the next high tide. So now let's proceed with the working principle of double tidal lagoon baseload scene. At high tide, the sea gates of the high lagoon are open and the high lagoon is filled up to high tide level. When the EBB tide begins, the sea gates of the high lagoon are closed and remain closed until the next high tide. At low high tide, the sea gates of the low lagoon are open and the low lagoon is emptied to low tide level. When the flood tide begins, the sea gates of the low lagoon are closed and remain closed until the next low tide. The sea gates are functionally identical to one-way flap valves and may be engineered as such. So overall, yung working principle ng double tidal lagoon, so yung at certain level ng tide, yung sea gates ay mag-open sa mga tidal lagoon. Kunwari at high tide, mag-open yung sea gate ng high lagoon doon hanggang sa mapuno yung lagoon na yon sa high tide level. Ganon din sa low tide. Kapag low tide, yung sea gates naman ng low lagoon ay nagbubukas para ma-empty niya yung low lagoon sa low tide level. So, identical lang naman sila when it comes to function. At kaya nga sila tinawag na double tidal lagoon. Since we know the sources of tidal power generation, now let's proceed with the advantages of tidal energy. So, there are indeed some of the key advantages that make tidal energy a promising source of renewable power. Now, let's break down each one advantages. First, it is renewable. Tidal energy is a renewable source of energy, which means energy doesn't deplete as it is used. The source is inexhaustible. Tidal energy harnesses the natural rise and fall of tides, a phenomenon driven by the gravitational forces of the moon and sun. These forces are constant and will continue indefinitely, making tidal energy a truly renewable source. So unlike fossil fuels are finite and take millions of years to form. Tidal energy replenishes itself with every tide cycle. So in addition to being a renewable energy source, it gives us zero carbon emissions since tidal power stations do not emit greenhouse gases during production of electricity. So tidal energy is a clean energy. The power plants do not burn fossil fuels to generate electricity. This means they produce no greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, which contribute to climate change. Tidal energy is a clean source of energy that helps reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and mitigate the impacts of global warming. So, third advantage it is very predictable. So, tidal currents are highly predictable. Low and high tides follow well-known cycles, making it easier to know when power will be produced throughout the day. So, the tidal energy is a reliable and consistent source of power. So, unlike solar and wind power, the two are dependent on weather conditions, while tides are highly predictable. We can accurately forecast high and low tides years in advance. The predictability makes tidal energy a reliable source of electricity, allowing grid operators to better manage energy supply and demand. So tidal energy gives us high power output. They are able to produce high amounts of electricity. One of the main reasons for this is that water is denser than air, almost 800 times denser than air. This means that tidal turbine will produce substantially more energy than the wind with a wind turbine of the same size. So, the source of a high power output is the dense energy source of water. Water is significantly denser than air, meaning it contains more energy for the same volume of air. This high energy density allows tidal turbines to generate more power than wind turbines of the same size. Tidal power plants can produce substantially amounts of electricity, making them an efficient way to harness the energy of the oceans. So, tidal energy offers a compelling combination of benefits. It's renewable, clean, predictable, and powerful. While there are still challenges to overcome, such as high upfront costs and potential environmental impacts, tidal energy has the potential to play a significant role in our transition to a sustainable energy future. So now let's proceed with the disadvantages of tidal energy. First, it is expensive. One of the biggest drawbacks of tidal power is the high upfront cost. Tidal energy turbine needs to be much sturdier than wind turbines because of the high density of water. So most of the tidal power plants that are currently in operation are made of tidal barrage. The construction of tidal barrage is extremely expensive. So the Rance power plant itself was expensive to build in its day, and it took about 20 years to actually pay for itself. This is one of the major reasons the proposed £30 billion Severn Barrage has not gone ahead. So building tidal power plants, whether they are barrage or lagoon, requires significant investment. The construction of massive structures like seawalls and the installation of specialized turbines are costly endeavors. This high initial cost can be a barrier to the development of tidal energy projects. One factor that makes it expensive also is the maintenance challenges. So the harsh marine environment can take a toll on tidal power plant components. Saltwater corrosion, strong currents, and marine organisms can cause wear and tear on turbines and other equipment, leading to ongoing maintenance expenses. The tidal energy has also environmental effects. Tidal barrage disrupts the natural flow of water in and out of estuaries. This can have an effect on marine life, disrupting life cycles and spawning. Underwater turbines have the potential to kill marine life, much like wind turbines kill birds. This concern is valid amongst all tidal power plants, but larger marine life is likely to only be affected by tidal stream generators. So in runs, since the tidal barrage construction needed to drain out the estuary in the initial years after the construction was completed, there were several severe impacts to the local environment. However, 10 years later, it was considered that the Rance estuary once again had a rich diversity of aquatic life. So after the seawall was built in 1994, pollution built up in the newly created Siwa Lake Reservoir, making useless for agriculture. Concentration of perfluorooctane sulfonate or PFOS measured in Lake Siwa were amongst the greatest ever measured in the environment. So, tidal power plants can alter the natural flow of water, affecting the habitats of marine life. Changes in water levels, currents, and sediment patterns can disrupt the delicate balance of coastal ecosystem. So the tidal turbines can pose a threat to marine animals. Fish and other creatures can be injured or killed if they come into contact with the rotating blades. Noise from the turbines can also disturb marine mammals and other animals that rely on sound for communication and navigation. The construction of tidal barrages or lagoons can load and lead to the loss of intertidal habitats, which are important breeding and feeding grounds for many marine species. Changes in water flow can affect water quality and sediment transport, potentially harming marine life. So, there are also other disadvantages. So, first, it gives limited location. Suitable sites for tidal power plants are limited to areas with significant tidal ranges or strong currents. This geographical constraint restricts the widespread development of tidal energy technology. While tides are predictable, the amount of power generated can vary depending on the tide cycle. This intermittency can make it challenging to integrate tidal energy into the electric grid. While offering many advantages, tidal energy also comes with significant challenges. The high cost and potential environment impacts are major hurdles that needs to be addressed to make tidal energy a more viable option for the future. Ongoing research and technology advancements are crucial to overcome this limitation and unlock the full potential of tidal power. So now let's discuss the future of tidal energy. Tidal energy has the potential to offer all the power we need, eliminating the needs for fossil fuels. As stated by CIMEC Atlantis Energy, the tide moves a huge amount of water twice a day. Harnessing it could provide a great deal of energy, around 20% of Britain's needs. However, as tidal technology has only been available for a few decades, many challenges remain. British companies and universities are currently developing a new wave of technology supported by grants from the 50 million Marine Renewables Deployment Fund. Almost 10 years ago, the Southwest Regional Development Agency installed the Wave Hub, the most technologically sophisticated open-access site for testing offshore renewable technologies. It is 16 kilometers off the Cornwall coast. Another company also makes a splash in the United Kingdom, which is the European Marine Energy Center in Orkney.
Hello guys! Buckle up and prepare yourself for we are about to start the discussion about the solar thermal system. So, solar thermal system, tinatawag din siyang CSP or the Concentrating Solar Power. Yung pagkolekta niya ng enerhiya sa araw ay ginagamitan ng mirrors. Kung ikukumpara siya sa photovoltaic system, yun, kumukolekta ng araw sa solar panels. So, with the use of solar panels. So, balik tayo sa solar thermal system. After makakuha ng energy from the sun with the use of mirrors, i-reflect or i-redirect naman ito sa tube. So, sa loob ng tube, nandun yung fluid na tinatawag nating HTF or Heat Transfer Fluid. Then, after ma-reach yung heat ng HTF, for example, at 400 degrees centigrade, pupunta yung HTF sa heat exchanger set na tinatawag. So, sa loob ng heat exchanger set, nandoon yung water. Yung water na nasa ibang tube, pwera pa yung papasukan ng HTF. So, with that, matatransfer yung init ng HTF doon sa water. So, take note, hindi yun magmi-mix. Then, after that, mag-create yun na tinatawag na superheated steam. So, yung steam na yun yung papatakbo ng turbine or yung steam turbine na tinatawag natin. Then, kapag nag-rotate yung steam turbine, gayon din yung generator. Then, yung generator, ito yung nagko-convert ng mechanical energy to electrical energy. So, doon na nagkikreate yung types of solar thermal system. So, we have parabolic trough, solar tower, the linear Fresnel reflector, and parabolic dish. So, lahat yan, same ng operation. Maliban lang sa way ng pagkolekta ng enerhiya sa araw and kung saan mag-focus or magre-redirect. So, although they are all using mirrors, but with different strategies to get that maximum energy from the sun. Next is parabolic troughs. So, yung mga troughs na yun, na kilala rin bilang line focus collectors, ay nakaayos ng magkakatabi sa mga hanay sa isang solar field at binubuo ng mahabang parabolic shape na reflector na nakatutok sa isang tubo sa gitna ng trough. So, ang mga collectors na ito ay gumagamit ng isang axis or yung tinatawag nating single axis solar tracking system para sundan ng araw habang ito'y gumagalaw mula sa silangan patungong kanluran. So, upang matiyak na laging may makukuha or laging pinakamataas yung makukuhang enerhiya mula sa araw. So, yung araw na tumatama sa mga salamin. So, ang receiver pipe sa gitna ay maaaring umabot ng mga temperatura na higit sa 100 or 400 degrees centigrade dahil ang trough ay nakatutok sa araw at pinapalakas ang intensity mula 30 hanggang 100 times kaysa sa normal na. So, next is yung mga tubo doon sa ibabaw ng or sa gitna ng parabolic trough. Yun ay gawa sa salamin at hindi metal. Yung salamin kasi pinapayagan na makapasok ang init mula sa araw pero hindi ito pinapalabas yung init na yon. So, sa loob ng tubo, may fluid na pinapainit ng enerhiya mula sa mga parabolic na segment. So, dahil dito, yung fluid ay maaaring umabot ng hanggang 400 degrees centigrade or sa mga bagong pag-aaral, pwede pang mag-exceed with the use of different HTF or the heat transfer fluid. So later on, so next is afterwards, this is what happened. This is just the magnified view of the parabolic trough. We have fluid part, inner layer, the vacuum, and the glass. So also the orientation of sunlight redirecting or reflecting to tube. So for the second one, there are fluid in, fluid out, collector supports, reflective coating or mirrors, and central pipe. So next is, on this tube, inside this we call it heat transfer fluid. So then it will be distributed on a different unit of a parabolic trough. So once again, the parabolic will absorb an energy from the sun. I-reflect niya yon sa mga tube na to, yung nasa gitna. So yung 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ayun, 5 na tube. So syempre, mare-reflect doon sa tube na nakatapat ng parabolic trough. So ganito ang operation ng parabolic troughs kasi. So inside the tube is a heat transfer fluid. Then may initan yung heat transfer, yung HTF na tinatawag natin, tapos pupunta ngayon siya sa heat exchanger set. So inside the heat exchanger set is water. Then there will be a heat transfer coming from this tube. So that contains the heat transfer fluid. So may initan yung tubig. Then it will become steam. Then the steam will travel towards the steam turbine. So thereby making the steam turbine rotate as well as the generator, resulting in the generation of electricity. So then the output voltage within the power plant is being connected on transmission line to a step-up transformer. So pinapataas yung voltahe. Bakit? Bakit kailangan pataasin yung voltahe ng bawat power plants? So the answer is to eliminate further losses due to very long transmission line. Next, the turbine is being rotated by pressurized steam. So then, the steam will be recycled. So within the system, with the use of the set condenser and the cooling tower, then it will undergo the condensation. So yung condensation, conversion ng gas to liquid. So within the condenser and cooling tower. So condensation is the process wherein matter is being converted from gas to liquid. So, as I said earlier. So, yung dating water in the form of gas, which is steam, yung pagka na-convert na siya sa liquid, then, it will pump back to the heat exchanger. Then, the heat transfer fluid that undergoes or that goes inside the heat exchanger will continue to cycle the system. So, there are different types of parabolic trough, which undergoes the same operation with each except for the left side, yung tinatawag natin na solar field na section. Then on the right side, the power block section, they are all the same sa lahat ng type ng solar thermal system. Pansinin dito, kumpara sa diagram na nauna, nito may hot salt tank at cold salt tank, which is yung tinatawag natin na thermal energy storage. So mamaya may intindihan nyo kung ano ba yung mga gamit ng mga to. So, may other group member. So, next is, on this tube, inside this, we call it heat transfer fluid. So, then it will be distributed on a different unit of a parabolic trough. So, once again, the parabolic will absorb an energy from the sun. I-reflect niya yon sa mga tube na to, yung nasa gitna. So, yung 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ayun, 5 na tube. So, syempre, mare-reflect doon sa tube na nakatapat ng parabolic trough. So, ganito ang operation ng parabolic troughs kasi. So, inside the tube is a heat transfer fluid. Then, may initan yung heat transfer, yung HTF na tinatawag natin, tapos pupunta ngayon siya sa heat exchanger set. So, inside the heat exchanger set is water. Then, there will be a heat transfer coming from this tube. So, that contains the heat transfer fluid. So, may initan yung tubig. Then, it will become steam. Then, the steam will travel towards the steam turbine. So, thereby making the steam turbine rotate as well as the generator, resulting in the generation of electricity. So, then, the output voltage within the power plant is being connected on transmission line to a step-up transformer. So, pinapataas yung voltahe. Bakit? Bakit kailangan pataasin yung voltahe ng bawat power plants? So, the answer is to eliminate further losses due to very long transmission line. Next, the turbine is being rotated by pressurized steam. So then, the steam will be recycled. So within the system, with the use of the set condenser and the cooling tower, then it will undergo the condensation. So yung condensation, conversion ng gas to liquid. So within the condenser and cooling tower. So condensation is the process wherein matter is being converted from gas to liquid. So as I said earlier. So yung dating water in the form of gas, which is steam, yung pagka na-convert na siya sa liquid, then it will pump back to the heat exchanger. Then, the heat transfer fluid that undergoes or that goes inside the heat exchanger will continue to cycle the system. So, there are different types of parabolic trough which undergoes the same operation with each except for the left side. Yun tinatawag natin na solar field na section. Then, on the right side, the power block section, they are all the same sa lahat ng type ng solar thermal system.
Another representation of heat exchanger. Isa pang uri ng heat exchanger na tinatawag na shell and tube heat exchanger gamit ang larawan sa ating screen. Ano ito at paano ito gumagana? Ang shell and tube heat exchanger ay may dalawang pangunahing bahagi. Una ay ang shell. Ang shell ang malaking lalagyan kung saan dumadaloy ang isa sa mga fluid. Tubes naman, ito naman ang mga tubo sa loob ng shell kung saan dumadaloy ang isa pang fluid. Sa diagram, makikita natin na ang cold fluid o kulay asul ay pumapasok sa itaas na bahagi at dumadaloy sa loob ng mga tubo. Kasabay nito ang heating medium o mainit na fluid, ayun yung kulay pula, ay pumapasok sa shell at umiikot sa labas ng mga tubo. Habang dumadaloy ang dalawang fluid, may heat transfer na nangyayari. Ang init mula sa heating medium ay ipinapasa sa cold fluid sa loob ng mga tubo. Dahil dito, ang cold fluid ay umiinit at maaaring maging steam bago lumabas sa kabilang dulo. Ang proseso ay maaaring maganap ng pabaligtad, depende sa disenyo. Pwedeng nasa tube ang heating medium at nasa shell ang tubig. Bakit ito mahalaga? Ang ganitong disenyo ay mas epektibo sa heat transfer dahil sa malawak na surface area ng mga tubo. Karaniwang itong ginagamit sa mga power plant, industriya ng langis at pagpapalamig ng makina. Flexible ito dahil maaaring i-adjust ang flow ng fluid depende sa pangailangan. Sa madaling sabi, ang shell and tube heat exchanger ay isang mahalagang bahagi ng maraming industriya dahil sa kakayahan nitong magpalitan ng init ng mahusay. Ngayon naman ay ipapaliwanag ko kung paano gumagana ang shell and heat tube exchanger na kadalasang ginagamit sa mga solar thermal power plant bilang steam generator at superheater. Paano nga ba ito gumagana? Una, ang tubig ay pumapasok sa mga tubo o blue section sa diagram. Pangalawa naman, ang heat transfer fluid o ito naman yung pulang bahagi ay dumadaloy sa loob ng shell sa labas ng mga tubo. Pangatlo, habang dumadaloy ang tubig sa mga tubo, naiinitan ito ng heat transfer fluid mula sa shell. Dahil dito, nagiging steam ang tubig. Pang-apat, ang steam ay lalabas sa kabilang dulo ng heat exchanger at maaaring gamitin sa turbine ng power plant upang makabuo ng kuryente. Flexible design, depende sa disenyo. Maaaring baliktarin ang daloy, halimbawa na lang, pwedeng sa tubo dumadaan ang heat transfer fluid at sa shell naman ang tubig. Ang ganitong setup ay ginagamit sa iba't ibang industriya dahil sa mataas na efficiency sa heat transfer. Kahalagahan sa power plants. Sa mga solar thermal power plants, ginagamit ang heat exchanger bilang steam generator upang gawing steam ang tubig at bilang superheater upang pataasin ang temperatura ng steam bago ito pumasok sa turbine. Sa madaling salita, ang shell and tube heat exchanger ay isang mahalagang bahagi ng mga power plant, lalo na sa pagbuo ng kuryente gamit ang init. Makikita natin sa larawan ang isang actual setup ng heat exchanger sa isang solar thermal power plant. Sa Pilipinas, wala pa tayong solar thermal power plants. Pero sa US at mga disyerto, marami ang ganitong klase ng planta. Bakit nga ba sa mga disyerto? Dahil mataas ang sikat ng mga araw doon, kaya perpekto ito para sa solar thermal energy. Ano nga ba ang papel ng heat exchanger dito? Ang heat exchanger sa solar thermal power plant ay responsable sa pag-init ng tubig gamit ang init mula sa araw. Ginagamit ito bilang steam generator upang lumikha ng steam na magpapatakbo ng mga turbine para sa kuryente. Sa madaling salita, ito ang puso ng sistema na nagko-convert ng solar energy patungo sa kuryente. Kung makakabisita kayo sa isang solar thermal power plant, ganito ang itsura ng kanilang heat exchanger. Ito naman yung cutout view of heat exchanger. Ito pa yung isang cutout view ng heat exchanger. Ano ang steam turbine? Ang steam turbine ay isang uri ng turbine na gumagamit ng steam upang makalikha ng enerhiya. Ang pinaka-importanting bahagi nito ay ang blade, na idinisenyo upang gumana ayon sa ugali o behavior ng steam. Kapag dumaan ang steam sa mga blade, pinapaikot nito ang turbine na nagko-convert ng thermal energy patungo sa mechanical energy. Pagkakaiba ng steam turbine at hydroelectric turbine. Kung ikukumpara natin sa hydroelectric turbine, makikita natin na iba ang disenyo nito. Sa hydroelectric power plant, ang tubig ang nagpapakilos ng turbine. Kaya base sa behavior ng tubig ang disenyo nito. Sa steam turbine naman, ito ay idinisenyo upang gumana batay sa behavior ng steam. Sa madaling salita, ang steam turbine ay mahalagang bahagi ng mga power plant, lalo na sa mga gumagamit ng fossil fuels, nuclear energy at renewable energy, gaya ng solar thermal power plant. In Nevada, USA, there's a parabolic trough-designed solar power plants with 120 hectares of mirrors to focus sunlight around the size of 265 football fields. Its heat collectors are made up of long parabolic trough mirrors, each with a heat-collecting tube. When sunlight is reflected by the silver mirror, the temperature at the focal point is 70 times higher than normal sunlight. When the reflected sunlight focuses onto the heat-collecting tubes, it passes through the vacuum layers and into the anti-reflection coating of the tubes, heating up the synthetic oil composites inside, while the vacuum layers prevent heat losses. To maximize efficiency, mirrors would trace sunlight, adjusting angles accordingly. The thermal energy collected is used to heat up the liquid oil composites. The high temperature liquids flow into the exchanger from the tubes, boiling water to vapors. Driving the turbines to generate electricity. This power plant generates enough electricity to provide for 2,500 households per year. In Nevada, USA, there's a parabolic trough-designed solar power plants with 120 hectares of mirrors to focus sunlight around the size of 265 football fields. Its heat collectors are made up of long parabolic trough mirrors, each with a heat-collecting tube. When sunlight is reflected by the silver mirror, the temperature at the focal point is 70 times higher than normal sunlight. When the reflected sunlight focuses onto the heat collecting tubes, it passes through the vacuum layers and into the anti-reflection coating of the tubes, heating up the synthetic oil composites inside, while the vacuum layers prevent heat losses. To maximize efficiency, mirrors would trace sunlight, adjusting angles accordingly. The thermal energy collected is used to heat up the liquid oil composites. The high temperature liquids flow into the exchanger from the tubes, boiling water to vapors. Driving the turbines to generate electricity. This power plant generates enough electricity to provide for total
Parabolic traps operating principle. Heat from the sun is being collected by special mirrors, which is then reflected to the pipe that runs down the middle of the trap. Ang parabolic trap daw ay gumagamit ng mga special mirrors na nagre-reflect ng araw. Ganito yan. Ito ang special mirrors na sinatawag. For example, ito ang salamin or mirror, special mirrors. Ito yung tube sa taas niya. Ngayon, yung araw, yung sinag dyan magdadirect sa mirror. Ngayon, yung mirror, i-reflect naman niya pabalik doon sa tube na may lamang HTF. Dahil sa pag-reflect ng sinag na araw na yan sa tube, yung HTF sa loob ng tube ay napapainit niya. Mabilis na napapainit. Within this central pipe is a heat transfer fluid. Yun yung sinabi ko kanina, yung HTF. Flowing inside it. The HTF inside the pipe can reach a temperature around 400 degrees Celsius. As the trap focuses sun at 30 to 100 times its normal intensity. Yung 300 to 100 times na yan, ito yan. Yung sinag ng araw na nakadirect sa atin, mainit na yun, di ba? Pag naman ni-reflect siya pag naman yung sinag na araw ni-reflect ng mirror pabalik sa ating tube na may lamang HTF. Kung gaano kainit sa atin direct, 30 to 100 times yung init nun pag binalik ng mirror papunta sa may tube. Ganon kainit yun. Yun yung malaking katulungan ng mga special mirrors na ito. This hot fluid goes to heat exchangers, where the heat is transferred to water generating high pressure superheated steam. Ngayon, yung fluid na nasa loob ng ating tube, yung HTF, pag mainit na yan, pumupunta yan sa may heat exchanger, where yung init na yon natatransfer niya sa tubig. Sa sobrang init nung ating HTF na yon, pag dumali siya sa may tubig, nakapag-generate siya ng high pressure superheated steam. This steam, yung steam na to, yun ngayon ang nagpapamove sa turbine para mapapower nyo yung generator para makapag-produce ng electricity. The HTF keeps circulating within the system. Yun nga, yung HTF na yan, paikot-ikot lang sa system yan. Hanggang sa makapag-produce ng maraming electricity. The steam is being condensed, which is not to be sent back through the heat exchangers. Which is to be sent back through the heat exchangers. Yung steam na yan, yung tubig yun. Yung steam, ito yung from liquid to gas. Ngayon, yung gas na yan, nagiging liquid ulit siya. Tapos, naibabalik siya ngayon sa may heat exchangers dahil sa may condenser. At yung cycle na yan ay paulit-ulit ng ulit na nangyayari. Heat transfer fluids. In a solar thermal system, heat transfer fluid or HTF is a liquid or a gas specifically manufactured for the purpose of transmitting heat from one system to another. Yung heat transfer fluids na yan or HTF, pwede siya maging liquid or gas. Ang ginagawa ng HTF nito ay siya yung pinapainit ng sinag ng araw. Dahil sa HTF nito, nakapag-produce ng electricity gamit ang solar thermal. Dahil yung HTF, pinapainit ng mirror, yung pagka na-reach na yung temperature niya, for example, 400 degrees. Pag pumunta ngayon sa tubig yan, sa may heat exchanger, mapag-produce ng steam hanggang sa mapag-produce ng electricity. Yun ang purpose ng HTF. Ang example ng mga HTF or heat transfer fluid ay air, water, molten salts, glycol base, glycerin base, and synthetic oil. Yung air and water, hindi na masyadong ginagamit sa pagdidesign yan. Dahil yung air, di rin naman madalas nagagamit yan. Yung water naman, pwede siya. Pero kung direct, pero malaki pinagkaiba niya sa tatlo. Or sa pinakagamit naman dito ay synthetic oils. Bakit hindi gamit ang tubig? Example, yung tubig, ang boiling point niya ay 100 degrees lang. Yung synthetic oil or molten salts, around 400 degrees. Nakita natin difference. Yung water, mabilis siyang mag-cool down. Unless pwera dun sa iba, nawawagal yung cool down niya. Isang factor yon kung bakit hindi na masyadong gamit ang tubig. Dahil sa matagal na cool down nung iba, bukod sa tubig, pwede silang gamitin tuwing gabi. Dahil, pag pinapainit sa tube yan, yung iba, napupunta sa heat exchanger, yung iba naman napupunta sa may tank. Yung tank na yon ay nag-a-act na parang thermos. Pre-preserve niya yung init nung HTF na yon. Dahil sa mababa nga yung cool down, mas matagal ang heat. Matagal na nga yung heat na nakandun pa siya sa tank na parang thermos. Dahil sa may tank na yan, dahil mabagal ang cool down, yung system magagamit pa rin yan kahit walang araw. Kahit maulap, especially pagkagabi walang araw. Tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang pag-produce ng electricity. Walang makakapigil sa kanya. Ngayon naman, pag sa tubig, ganoon lang din, direct. Pero, hindi siya makapag-produce ng electricity pagkagabi o kaya pagka maulap. Yun ang isang factor na tinitingnan ng mga engineers sa pagde-design. Kaya ang yung air and water hindi masyadong ginagamit sa pagde-design. Mas ginagamit ng synthetic oil, molten salt, glycol base, glycerin base. Ano sa apat na yun? Kaya yun ang the best. Sa pagpili naman ng pag-design, kung anong HTF ang gagamitin, depende yan. Nakadepende sa lugar na paggagawaan. Kaya hindi tayo makapagsabi kung alin sa mga HTF na fluids na ang the best. The following characteristics are being considered on what type of HTF is to be used in solar thermal power plant. First is the operating temperature. This refers to the temperature range at which the HTF can efficiently and safely operate. Solar thermal plants often work at high temperatures to maximize efficiency, so the HTF needs to handle that without degrading or becoming unsafe. In operating temperature, kino-consider ng mga engineers kung anong HTF ang ginagamit nila. Dahil yung HTF, may mga temperature ranges yan. Iba-iba yan. Kung anong mas mataas na range ng temperature, yun yung mas efficient. Tapos, kino-consider nila kung mataas nga yung temperature range at kung safe ba ito na i-operate sa solar thermal plants. Solar thermal plants work in high temperatures, yun nga, sinabi kanina. Yung solar thermal plants, gumagana siya sa high temperature. Kaya ang ginagamit dito ay mga HTF na mataas hang temperature range kumpara sa water na 100 degrees Celsius lang. Yung HTF, kailangan ma-handle niya yung high temperature na ito nang hindi nasisira or hindi siya nagiging unsafe. Next is life cycle. This considers the operation lifespan of the HTF. How long can it be used before it needs replacement? Factors like stability, degradation, resistance, and maintenance requirements influence the life cycle. Ngayon, sa life cycle, kino-consider ng mga engineers yung operational lifespan nito. Halimbawa, kung ganong katagal ba ito pwedeng gamitin, for example, 1 taon. Kino-consider nila yun. Kung sa 1 taon na yun, kung kailangan siyang palitan, yung kailangan yung tinitingnan ng mga engineers. Isa pa sa mga tinitingnan sa pag-design nito ay yung stability. Tsaka yung hindi niya madaling masira. Tsaka yung maintenance requirements niya, kung kailan ba siya kailangan ng maintenance para magtagal yung life cycle. Kaya kino-consider din ito sa pagpili ng HTF. Next is heat transfer capability. This is the heart of the HTF's job. How effectively can it absorb and transport heat? High heat transfer capacity means a more efficient system, potentially reducing the size and cost of the plant. Yun nga sinabi kanina. Yung heat transfer capability, kino-consider ng engineers dahil ito nga yung pinaka-heart ng HTF. Ito yung pinaka-ginagawa ng HTF sa loob ng solar thermal plant. Heat storage aspect. Some solar thermal plants incorporate thermal energy storage or TES. To continue generating power even when the sun isn't shining, the HTF's ability to store heat or facilitate heat storage is crucial for TES implementation. Sa heat storage aspect, kino-consider dito ng mga engineers yung capability ng HTF na pwede siyang maging may store sa isang tank. For example ng HTF ay na isa na water. Yung water, hindi siya magaganong pinipili ngayon sa pag-design dahil ang boiling point niya ay 100 degrees lang. Ibig sabihin, 100 degrees lang, mababa yung mas mabilis siya magko-cool down. Yung iba na mga HTF, nagre-range yung temperature nila from 400 pataas. Dahil sa 400 pataas na yon, ibig sabihin nun, mas matagal yung cool down nila. Ngayon, mas matagal yung cooldown ng HTF na yon. Ang ginagawa dito, yung ibang HTF nagpupunta sa may heat exchange. Yung iba naman napupunta sa storage or sa sealed tank na para siyang thermos. Doon ay imbak para pagkakailangan or sa gabi, walang araw, pwedeng gamitin ngayon yung mga na-imbak sa tank na yon, or kung kailan naman na maulan o maulap. Overall safety. Safety is paramount. The HTF should pose minimal risk in terms of toxicity, flammability, and environmental impact. Safety also includes the stability of the fluid under operating conditions. Sa overall safety, siyempre, kailangan i-consider talaga ng mga engineers sa pag-design. Dahil, yung mga STF na yan, mga toxic yan. Highly flammable at pwede siyang maka-impact sa environment natin na ikakasama nito. Cost economic. Pag-uusapan naman natin ngayon yung cost. Economic plays a significant role. The cost of the HTF itself, along with its handling, maintenance, and disposal, are all factors in the overall cost of the solar thermal plant. Sa cost naman, kino-consider ng mga engineers yung pagpili ng HTF sa presyo nito. Siyempre, meron ka nga HTF na mas mababa ang presyo, pero yung life cycle naman niya ay mababa lang at hindi siya masyadong efficient. Ngayon, yung cost ng HTF na yan, binabari yan sa maintenance, disposal. Kaya lahat ng factors na yan sa overall cost in the solar thermal plant, ini-implement yan ng mga engineers.
Okay, so why use HTF or heat transfer fluid instead of the direct system in which water is instantly turned into steam by the heat of reflected by mirrors in solar thermal system or CSP, concentrating solar power. Bakit nga ba hindi na lang tubig? Bakit kailangan pa natin gamitin yung HTF? Ang mahal-mahal nun. Bakit hindi na lang tubig or direktang tubig na lang? So, sasagutin natin yan sa next slide. Okay, the answer is, these working fluids have high heat capacity. It can maintain a high level of hotness in a long period of time. That is why in CSP or concentrating solar power, large volume of HTF, heat transfer fluid, is heated to an elevated temp during daytime where sunlight intensity is at its peak. Then it is being stored in a tight vessel. It acts as a reserve power that can be used during cloudy days when the sun's intensity is at its lowest, or during nighttime where there is totally no presence of sunlight. Bakit HTF? Why not use water or yung tinatawag nating direct system kung saan tubig mismong ginagamit? Ang nire-receive kasi na temperature ng HTF ay 400 degrees centigrade or more. Ang tubig naman is 100 degrees lang. Pag lumagpas na ron ay mag-evaporate na, mag-evaporate na yung tubig. Pwede naman siyang gamitin, pero hindi na siya magagamit kapag gabi na or wala ng heat from the sun. In simple words, yung HTF na to is kayang tumanggap ng mas maraming heat kaysa sa tubig. Hindi ito magiging steam agad when it reaches 100 degrees. It allows to transmit heat from one system to another. Kaya nitong patagalin yung init sa kanya. Kaya ito nakakapag-reserve ng energy that we can use at night or when there is no heat from the sun. So, sa madaling salita, mas marami kasi yung capacity ng HTF para sa heat. Tapos, kaya nitong i-reserve yung init, ilalagay lang natin siya sa tight vessel kung saan pwede nang gamitin yung tinabi natin na init na yun pag naggabi na, umuulan na, or cloudy na. Okay, sa slide na to, nandito yung parabolic trough basic diagram. Ito pa lang yung basic na diagram. Marami pa tong diagram, pero yung sa may part kung nasan yung mga generator, hindi yun nababago. We can see here is the part of the parabolic trough. The curved mirror reflect the sun's heat to the glass tube. So, alin nga ba dyan yung may glass tube at yung may mirror? Yun yung part na kung saan may 5 nakapila. So, sa loob nito ay yung HTF or heat transfer fluid. Pupunta yan sa heat exchanger na may laman na tubig. Pero dahil sa init na meron yung heat transfer fluid na may 400 Celsius or more, kaya pag nasa heat exchanger na siya, yung tubig sa loob nito is mag-evaporate. Tapos, magpo-produce siya ng steam. Steam that helps to generate electricity from the steam turbine. Meron din diyang condenser kung saan yung steam will turn back to water with the process of condensation. Then, it will go back to the heat exchanger. So, ulit-ulit lang nagkakaroon siya ng cycle. So, dito sa may basic diagram na to, pwede dito i-apply yung direct system. Since wala ditong tank na mamaya babanggitin natin. Hindi dito nag-i-store ng init or yung HTF hindi dito nag-store ng ng init. So sa illustration naman na to, meron na dito nadagdag. So dito naman bakit may tangke na? Unlike sa basic diagram ng parabolic trough, paano nga ba nagagamit yung solar thermal power sa gabi? So using those tank, yung hot salt tank and cold salt tank, the HTM can preserve its heat. Heat transferred fluid like molten salt can be preserved in the hot salt tank. Hindi yan yung asin na tinitikman natin. Some of the HTM will be used to the heat exchanger, while others go to tight vessel or yung hot salt tank nga. Mape-preserve dito yung heat. Then magagamit ito pag gabi na, or pag cloudy, or kaya tag-ulan. Unlike sa direct system, which is water lang yung ginagamit. Water is directly evaporized by the heat of sun. Kapag maaraw lang natin siya pwedeng gamitin. Other than that, useless na siya. Pag gabi, umuulan o maulap, hindi na natin siya magagamit. Kasi nga, hindi na ito kaya mag-preserve ng init na pwedeng mag-evaporize yung tubig na nasa heat exchanger. Parang hindi ka nagagamit dito ng heat exchanger since yung mismong tubig na is mag-evaporate na siya sa araw. The solar tower principle. The setup includes an array of large number computer-controlled sun tracking mirrors known as heliostats. This is a type of mirror that the solar tower use. Heliostats are designed to track the sun's apparent motions in the sky, and they are often made of plane mirrors. So, sunlight can be concentrated as much as 1,500 times its normal intensity. These mirrors are moved in dual axis, north to south and east to west, and are located at the ground level, which collects energy from the sun, then reflect it towards a receiver which contains HTF or heat transfer fluid located at the top of the tower. Meron siyang thermal receiver kung saan mayroon itong heat transfer fluid. Doon nirerekta na ang heliostats yung sunlight. The HTF is being heated at around 600 degrees centigrade, much higher than the parabolic trough. And just like the parabolic trough, through pipes, it goes to a setup heat exchanger. Then, it transfers the heat to water, thereby generating high-pressure superheated steam, which is being used to turn a steam turbine. Pinagkaiba lang nila dito is how they receive the sunlight. May kanya-kanya silang unique of receiving heat. Pero yung process ng pag-generate ng kuryente is halos parehas lang sila or same sila ng parabolic trough. So, the basic diagram of solar tower. So, ito yung basic diagram ng solar tower. As we can see, yung part na may heat exchanger, generator, and so on, is halos same lang sa may parabolic trough. Kasi parehas nga lang yung principle nila when it comes to generating electricity. Since parehas lang yung way nila ng pag-generate ng electricity. Ngayon, ang pinagkaiba lang nila yung pag-collecta talaga ng araw. Kung mapapansin nyo sa may diagram, yung mirror nila is flat na and nakatutok siya sa tower. Yung sikat ng araw, kukolektahin niya ng mga mirrors or ng heliostats. Tapos, re-reflect dun sa thermal receiver na nasa taas ng tower. Meron, yung yung thermal receiver na to, meron tong HTF or heat transfer fluid. Yung heat transfer fluid na to is pupunta sa heat exchanger. Mayroon din mapupunta sa tight vessel o yung hot salt tank na makikita nyo dyan sa may diagram para i-preserve yung napunta dun na, kasi yung HTF meron pupunta sa heat exchanger at yung iba naman sa tight vessel. Yung pupunta sa tight vessel, ito yung mga mape-preserve na energy na magagamit kapag wala ng araw. Halos parehas nga lang siya sa principle ng parabolic trough. Yun yung cycle ng solar tower. So, dito naman yung schematic diagram versus the actual ng solar tower. So, kung mapapansin nyo sa schematic diagram, mas detailed na siya kumpara sa may basic diagram. Yung mga parts niya, yung pag-function, hindi kasi ganun ka-detailed sa may basic. So, unlike Tas mostly parts lang kasi yung included dun sa may basic. Dito makikita natin yung setup ng buong power plant. Sa actual naman, parang ano lang siya parang salamin na tower lang. Yun talaga yung una mong mapapansin. Pero yung mga parts na nagpapagenerate mismo ng kuryente is hindi siya nakalabas or visible agad. So mapapansin natin dito sa schematic diagram, bakit parang mas marami yung mga nakatayong ganyan, ganito, mga parts, compare dun sa may basic diagram. Kasi sa basic diagram, papakita lang dun talaga yung flow or yung cycle ng ng solar tower. Dito naman, lahat ng kailangan or lahat ng parts ng buong planta ng solar tower is makikita mo na. Sa actual picture, para lang siyang para lang siyang tubig kung titingnan mo sa taas. Pero, yun yung heliostat, yung mga kulay blue na mirror. Tapos yung tower niya na yun, yung nasa harapan, kung mapapansin. So, next slide. Makikita natin dito yung basic diagram naman versus actual. So, sa mga nabanggit ko nga kanina, sa schematic, dun mo talaga makikita yung buong planta. Tapos sa basic diagram naman, mapapansin mo lang yung mga basic na parts, kung alin yung mismo nagpapagenerate ng ganito, ng kuryente, or yung kung paano nakukuha yung sunlight, ganyan, kung paano nire-reflect sa tower. Tapos, ayan, ulit yung actual picture, katulad lang nabanggit ko kanina, yun at yun lang din yun.
So now let's proceed to the general description of linear Fresnel reflector. The design combines parabolic trough and solar tower concepts, utilizing flat mirrors that moves on one axis. These mirrors collect sunlight and reflect it to a fixed receiver above, similar to a solar tower's operation. So the design of this type is the combination of parabolic trough and solar tower. This uses flat mirrors instead of parabolic mirrors used in parabolic troughs. These flat mirrors moves in one axis only, unlike solar tower and parabolic dish, which moves in two. So it adopts the working of solar tower, where the mirrors on the ground collects light from the sun and reflect it towards a fixed receiver located above. So previous design generates steam directly without the use of HTF, which are now obsolete. LFR nowadays also uses HTF to generate steam. So, the classic linear Fresnel reflector LFR features a single receiver on one tower. The improved compact linear Fresnel reflector CLFRs enhance efficiency by using multiple receivers for each mirror set, allowing adjacent mirrors to have varying inclinations to target different receivers. So the classic LFR has only one linear receiver on a single linear tower. In order to increase optical and ground use efficiency, the improved design, called compact linear Fresnel reflector CLFRs, use multiple receivers for each sets of mirrors so that adjacent mirrors have different inclination in order to target different receivers. So now let's talk about the basic diagram of the linear Fresnel reflector. So in this diagram, we have the secondary reflector and the reflector. Those are the mirrors. So the LFR consists of multiple rows of mirrors, each with a slightly different angle. These mirrors are arranged in a Fresnel pattern, which means that they approximate the shape of a much larger parabolic mirror. So this allows the LFR to achieve high concentration ratios with relatively simple and inexpensive mirrors. So unlike parabolic mirrors, in parabolic mirrors, those are curved mirrors or mirrors that are in the shape of parabolic, and with that mirror, masyado itong expensive compared sa mga flat mirrors. So next we have the receiver. So, ano ba yung receiver dito? Ang receiver dito sa diagram ay absorber tube. So, the receiver is a long linear tube that is positioned above the mirrors. It is typically coated with a black or other highly absorbent material such as HCF to maximize the absorption of solar radiation. The fluid inside the receiver, which can be water, oil, or another heat transfer fluid, is heated to high temperatures as it flows through the receiver. So, how does LFR works? The sunlight strikes the mirror and is reflected toward the receiver. So, the mirror are angled so that the reflected light converge onto the receiver. So, para daw yung tama ng araw, kapag tumama sa mirror, ay aaninag ito hanggang sa mismo kong receiver para makuha niya yung desired na energy niya para makapag-generate ng energy. So, the concentrated sunlight heats the fluid inside the receiver to high temperatures, typically between 100 degrees Celsius and 400 degrees centigrade. So, ang linear Fresnel reflector maaari daw natin gamitan ng water since ang boiling point nito ay 100 degrees centigrade, or kaya ng synthetic oils or other HTF products na higit sa taas na 400 degrees centigrade ang kanilang binibigay na temperature. So, the hot fluid can then be used to generate electricity by passing it through a heat exchanger to produce steam, which drives a turbine connected to a generator. So, alternatively, the hot fluid can be used directly for industrial process heat applications such as desalination, chemical production, or food processing. Linear Fresnel reflector offers a cost-effective approach to concentrating solar power, but they come with certain trade-offs. Now, let's delve into the general description of LFRs. First, flat mirrors are used, which is cheaper. So, what makes them cheaper? Flat mirrors are significantly cheaper to manufacture and install compared to the curved mirrors used in other CSP technologies like parabolic traps. So, this makes the LFR system more cost-effective and more economically viable, especially for large-scale deployments. So, the flat mirrors, when it comes to maintenance, it gives us much simpler maintenance. So, they are easier to clean and maintain, reducing operational costs. So, the flat shape of the mirror allows efficient space utilization. It allows for denser packing of mirrors, potentially capturing more sunlight in a given area. So, however, flat mirrors cannot achieve the same level of precise focus as curved mirrors due to its optical efficiency. This leads to some light spillage and reduces the overall optical efficiency of the system. So, one big disadvantage with this design is that the shading effect of adjacent mirrors, which can be encountered only by utilizing more ground space, which increases cost. The challenge in the LFR system, mirrors are arranged in rows, and during certain time of day, some mirrors can cast shadows on their neighbors. This shading effect reduces the amount of sunlight reaching the mirrors, lowering the system's overall performance. So, what are the mitigation strategies that we can provide to minimize the shading effect? So, first, we have to increase the spacing. The distance between the mirror rows can reduce shading, but this increases land use and cost. So we can also do heliostat control. Advanced control system can adjust the angle of individual mirrors to minimize shading throughout the day. And we can also optimize the layout. Careful design of the mirror field considering the sunspot and local terrain can minimize shading. Very high temperatures are not produced as compared to a parabolic trough or a solar tower, and therefore the efficiency is less. So what are the factors contributing to lower efficiency? So the optical losses. As mentioned earlier, flat mirrors have inherent optical losses due to their inability to perfectly focus sunlight. So the shading from the adjacent mirrors further reduces the amount of sunlight captured. The linear receiver in an LFR system may not be as efficient at absorbing heat as the receivers in other CSP technologies. So, even if it might offer cost-effective solution for concentrating solar power, they still face challenges related to optical efficiency and shading. While the flat mirrors reduce cost and simplify maintenance, they also contribute to lower overall efficiency. The shading effect of adjacent mirrors can be mitigated through various strategies, but it remains a factor to consider in LFR design. So there are ongoing research and development who are focused on improving the efficiency of LFR systems, making them a viable option for large-scale solar power production. So now let's proceed to the revision of design of linear Fresnel reflector. So the revision of design is called the compact LFR or compact linear Fresnel reflector. So let's talk about the concept of CLFR. So first, it have multiple absorbers. Unlike traditional LFR with a single receiver, compact LFR utilize multiple absorbers positioned closer to the mirrors. This allows for denser packing of mirrors and reduces the overall footprint of the system. Alternating inclinations. Mirrors in a CLFR system can alternate their inclination, minimizing shading effects and further optimizing space utilization. So, compact LFR designs offer the potential for more efficient land use and reduced costs. However, they require careful optimization to address challenges related to shading, thermal losses, and optical efficiency. So, when it comes to shading, the design of the mirrors and the spacing are being revision. So first, to optimize its mirror geometry, first we have to consider the shorter focal length. Reducing the focal length of the mirror allows for a more compact arrangement. However, this can also increases optical losses. So the width and spacing of mirrors, by carefully balancing the width of the mirrors and the spacing between them, it is a crucial role to minimize shading while maximizing amount of sunlight captured. So when it comes to the design of the receiver, a smaller receiver diameter can reduce heat losses and allow for close mirror placements. The more na you have of receivers, the smaller you can get them para ma-reduce yung heat losses at para sa ma-allow natin ang closer mirror placement. So, we can also improve the design with advanced insulation. So, efficient insulation of the receiver is essential to minimize heat loss, especially in compact design where components are close together. So, when it comes to considering compact linear LFR, to compact LFRs, shading and blocking. Next, we have thermal losses, optical efficiency, and cost. So when it comes to shading and blocking, these effects become even more critical in compact designs. Careful analysis and optimization are needed to minimize losses. So with components closer together managing thermal losses, it becomes more challenging. Efficient insulation and heat transfer mechanism are crucial when it comes to thermal losses. So while compactness is a goal, it's essential to maintain a reasonable level of optical efficiency. Trade-offs between size and performance need to be carefully evaluated. So the compact designs may require more complex tracking system and receiver design, which can impact the overall cost of the system. So now let's proceed to the revision of design of linear Fresnel reflector. So the revision of design is called the compact LFR or compact linear Fresnel reflector. So let's talk about the concept of CLFR. So first, it have multiple absorbers. Unlike traditional LFR with a single receiver, compact LFR utilize multiple absorbers positioned closer to the mirrors. This allows for denser packing of mirrors and reduces the overall footprint of the system. Alternating inclinations. Mirrors in a CLFR system can alternate their inclination, minimizing shading effects and further optimizing space utilization. So, compact LFR designs offer the potential for more efficient land use and reduced costs. However, they require careful optimization to address challenges related to shading, thermal losses, and optical efficiency. So when it comes to shading, the design of the mirrors and the spacing are being revision. So first, to optimize its mirror geometry, first we have to consider the shorter focal length. Reducing the focal length of the mirror allows for a more compact arrangement. However, this can also increases optical losses. So the width and spacing of mirrors, by carefully balancing the width of the mirrors and the spacing between them, it is a crucial goal to minimize shading while maximizing amount of sunlight captured. So when it comes to the design of the receiver, a smaller receiver diameter can reduce heat losses and allow for close mirror placements. The more na you have of receivers, the smaller you can get them para ma-reduce yung heat losses at para sa ma-allow natin ang closer mirror placement. So, we can also improve the design with advanced insulation. So, efficient insulation of the receiver is essential to minimize heat loss, especially in compact design where components are close together. So, when it comes to considering compact linear LFR, to compact LFRs, shading and blocking. Next, we have thermal losses, optical efficiency, and cost. So, when it comes to shading and blocking, these effects become even more critical in compact designs. Careful analysis and optimization are needed to minimize losses. So, with components closer together managing thermal losses, it becomes more challenging. Efficient insulation and heat transfer mechanism are crucial when it comes to thermal losses. So, while compactness is a goal, it's essential to maintain a reasonable level of optical efficiency. Trade-offs between size and performance need to be carefully evaluated. So, the compact designs may require more complex tracking system and receiver design, which can impact the overall cost of the system.
Now, we have the next type, the parabolic dish. This consists of sets of flat mirrors combined to form a large parabolic dishes that is attached to a motor sensor, which tracks the movement of the sun in dual axis. The collected energy from the sun is being concentrated to the PCU located at the focal point of the dish. The PCU consists mainly of thermal receiver and the Stirling engine. The thermal receiver, which is a heat exchanger, transfers its heat to the Stirling engine, causing it to reciprocate. This reciprocating movement causes the rotation of an electric generator. These dishes can concentrate sunlight much better than parabolic troughs, and the fluid run through them can reach temperatures upwards of 750 degrees centigrade. Because of the limitation of size and the small quantity of fluid, parabolic dish collectors are suitable for small-scale power generation up to a few kilowatts. Next, we have the operation principle of Stirling engine. Stirling engines can be hard to understand. Here are the key points. Every Stirling engine has a sealed cylinder with one part hot and other cold. The working gas inside the engine, which is often air, helium, or hydrogen, is moved by a mechanism from the hot side to the cold side. When the gas is on the hot side, it expands and pushes up on a piston. When it moves back to the cold side, it contracts. A parabolic dish is a solar concentrator that tracks the sun to maximize energy capture. It mirrors focused sunlight onto a concentrator, directing heat to a power conversion unit or the PCU with a Stirling engine which converts it into electricity. The elevation and azimuthal drive units enable tracking, adjusting the dish position for optimal sunlight exposure. A supporting frame, arm bracket, and control system ensure stability and efficiency, while the pylon column and the base provide structural support. This system is widely used for solar thermal power generation, efficiently harnessing renewable energy. Now, we will take a look at some of the largest solar thermal power stations in the world. These facilities harness the power of the sun using advanced technologies such as parabolic troughs and solar towers to generate clean energy. The Ouarzazate Solar Power Station in Morocco leads the list with a massive 510 megawatts capacity, while other major plants like Ivanpah in the USA and the Solaben in Spain also contribute significantly to renewable energy production. The Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Solar Park Phase 4 in Dubai, UAE is one of the world's largest and most ambitious solar energy projects, combining 600 megawatts of parabolic trough technology and 100 megawatts from a solar tower. It is designed to enhance the UAE's transition to renewable energy. Expected to be operational by 2022, this project is a crucial step towards sustainable power generation, reducing carbon emissions while harnessing the region's abundant sunlight. Once completed, it will significantly contribute to Dubai's goal of achieving 75% clean energy by year 2050.